Bruce Springsteen stopped concert when he saw terminally ill child's last wish. Response will shatter. Giant Stadium, East Rutherford, New Jersey. August 12, 1985, 8:23 p.m. Bruce Springsteen was deep into Born in the U.S.A. when something in the front row caught his eye. A handwritten sign held by trembling 12-year-old hands that read, "Bruce, last concert ever. Thunder Road for my dad." What Bruce did next would stop 76,000 people dead in their tracks and create the most heartbreaking moment in rock history. But to understand why this moment shattered everyone who witnessed it, you need to know about Carlos Rivera and the promise that brought him here. It was the summer of the Born in the U.S.A. tour. And Bruce Springsteen was at the absolute peak of his career. The album had spent 7 weeks at #1, and Bruce was selling out stadiums across America. Reagan was president, MTV ruled the airwaves, and Bruce's red bandana had become as iconic as his music. But in section 133, row A, seat 12, sat someone who belonged there more than anyone else in the building. Carlos Rivera, 12 years old, 87 pounds, wearing his father's faded Born to Run t-shirt that hung like a tent on his frail frame. Beside him, his mother Maria clutched a Polaroid photograph of her husband Roberto, taken at this very stadium 2 years earlier. Maria Rivera cleaned office buildings in downtown Newark from midnight to 6 a.m., then worked the breakfast shift at Tony's Diner until noon. She'd never owned a concert ticket in her life, but when Dr. Patterson told her Carlos had 6 weeks to live, she knew what she had to do. Carlos had been fighting Ewing's sarcoma for 10 months. In 1985, childhood cancer treatments were still primitive compared to what would come later. The chemotherapy was brutal, the radiation worse, and the prognosis for Ewing's sarcoma was grim. But through every procedure, every sleepless night in Newark, Beth Israel Hospital, one thing had remained constant. "Play Thunder Road, Mama," Carlos would whisper when the pain became unbearable. "Play the song Papa used to sing to me." Roberto Rivera had died suddenly in March 1983. A construction accident at a job site in Manhattan, leaving behind a wife, a 10-year-old son, and a collection of Bruce Springsteen bootlegs that he'd traded for like precious gems. Roberto had seen Bruce perform 12 times, starting with a club show in Asbury Park in 1973. Every night when Carlos was little, Roberto would sit on the edge of his son's bed with an old acoustic guitar and sing Thunder Road as a lullaby. His voice was rough from years of construction work, but filled with love. "This is our song, mijo," he would say. "When you hear this song, you'll know Papa's watching over you." After Roberto's death, that song became Carlos's connection to his father. Maria had bought a used cassette player from a pawn shop, and Carlos would fall asleep every night listening to Bruce's voice singing the song his father had made their own. 3 weeks earlier, Dr. Patterson had delivered the news that every parent dreads. "Maria, we've tried everything. The cancer has spread too aggressively. Carlos has perhaps 4 to 6 weeks. You should focus on making his remaining time as comfortable as possible." That night, as Maria sat in the plastic chair beside Carlos's hospital bed, trying to find words that didn't exist, Carlos spoke first. "I heard what Dr. Patterson told you, Mama." Maria felt her world crumble. "Carlos, it's okay. I'm not scared. But I have one wish. Can we see Bruce Springsteen? I want to hear Thunder Road the way Papa would have wanted to hear it with me. One last time." Maria had never felt so helpless. Bruce Springsteen tickets were impossible to get. Scalpers outside Giant Stadium were asking $200 for nosebleed seats, more than Maria made in 2 weeks. But looking at her son's face, she knew she had to try. The next morning, Maria started making phone calls from the hospital payphone. She called every radio station in the tri-state area, explaining Carlos's situation to anyone who would listen. She wrote a letter to Bruce's fan club, though she knew thousands of people wrote similar letters every day. What Mariah didn't expect was the response from her Newark community. Word spread through the neighborhood about Carlos's wish. Roberto had been beloved. He'd coached Little League, helped elderly neighbors fix their stoops, and never passed a homeless person without offering whatever change he had. Tony, who owned the diner where Maria worked, put a coffee can on the counter with a handwritten sign: "Help Carlos Rivera see Bruce." The local parish, St. Lucy's, took up a special collection. Roberto's union brothers from Local 825 passed a hard hat at every job site in North Jersey. Within 10 days, they'd raised $340, enough for 2 tickets from a scalper and gas money for Maria's rusted Buick. When Maria told Carlos they were going to the concert, he cried for the first time since his diagnosis. "Really, Mama? We're really going to see Bruce?" "Really, mijo. You and me and Papa's spirit. We're all going together." The night before the concert, Carlos barely slept. He spent hours listening to his bootleg tapes, practicing singing along to every song. At 87 pounds, his voice was weak, but his determination was absolute. "I want to sing loud enough so Papa can hear me in heaven," Carlos told his mother. That morning, Carlos insisted on wearing his father's Born to Run t-shirt, the one Roberto had bought at his first Bruce concert in 1975. It was 3 sizes too big now, but Carlos wouldn't consider anything else. Maria had made a sign on cardboard torn from a Wheaties box. "Bruce, last concert ever. Thunder Road for my dad." She'd used a black magic marker and drawn a small cross in the corner. They arrived at Giant Stadium in Maria's Buick 2 hours before the gates opened. Carlos in a borrowed wheelchair, Maria carrying his medication in a paper bag, both of them overwhelmed by the thousands of Bruce fans already gathering in the parking lot. The Boomtown Rats opened the show, but Carlos barely noticed. He was saving his energy for Bruce. When the lights dimmed at 7:45 p.m. and Bruce walked onto the stage in his jeans and sleeveless t-shirt, the roar from 76,000 people was deafening. For the first hour, it was pure Bruce Springsteen magic. Born in the U.S.A., Dancing in the Dark, Cover Me. Carlos sang along to every word he knew, his voice barely audible but his joy unmistakable. Then Bruce launched into Born in the U.S.A. Again, this time as a mid-set rocker. The entire stadium was on its feet, American flags waving, voices raised in unison. It was July 4th energy in the middle of August. Carlos struggled to stand from his wheelchair, using all his remaining strength to hold up his cardboard sign. Maria helped him, lifting the sign high enough to catch the glare of the stage lights. That's when Bruce saw it. Bruce Springsteen had been performing for 15 years. He'd played for factory workers and college kids in clubs and arenas, through the punk era and the disco years. He thought he understood his audience. But when his eyes landed on that simple magic marker sign held by a child who clearly belonged in a hospital bed, everything changed. The E Street Band kept playing behind him, but Bruce wasn't hearing the music anymore. He was reading those words over and over. Last concert ever. Thunder Road for my dad. His Fender Telecaster felt heavy in his hands. 76,000 people were singing Born in the U.S.A. at the top of their lungs. But all Bruce could see was this 12-year-old boy who had somehow made it to Giant Stadium despite everything working against him. Bruce walked to the front of the stage and raised his hand to stop the music. The gesture was unmistakable. Even Clarence Clemens lowered his saxophone mid-note. "Hold on, everybody," Bruce said into his microphone. "Just hold on a minute." The E Street Band gradually stopped playing. 76,000 people fell silent, trusting that the boss knew what he was doing. "I see something down here that I need to address," Bruce said, his voice carrying clearly through Giant Stadium's sound system. "There's a young man with a sign that just stopped me in my tracks." Carlos, with Maria's help, lifted the sign as high as he could manage. His arms were shaking, but his grip was determined. Bruce read the words aloud. "Bruce, last concert ever. Thunder Road for my dad." His voice caught slightly on dad. The silence in Giant Stadium was absolute. 76,000 people understanding simultaneously that they were witnessing something beyond entertainment. "What's your name, son?" Bruce called out. "Carlos Rivera," came the reply, thin but clear. "From Newark." "And where's your dad, Carlos?" The pause seemed to last forever. Then Carlos's voice, somehow carrying across the vast stadium. "He's in heaven, Mr. Bruce, but he loved you. He used to sing Thunder Road to me every night." That's when Bruce Springsteen, who had performed through Vietnam protests and Reagan rallies, who had sung about loss and hope for thousands of nights, broke down on stage. "Carlos Rivera from Newark," Bruce said, his voice thick with emotion. "Would you like to come up here with me? I think your dad would want us to sing his song together." What happened next had never occurred in rock history. Without being asked, security personnel immediately began coordinating to get Carlos and his wheelchair onto the stage. The crowd started applauding, but it wasn't their usual wild cheering. It was reverent, emotional, respectful. As Carlos was lifted onto the Giant Stadium stage, Bruce walked over and knelt down to his level. Their conversation was picked up by the microphones, but felt intensely private despite being heard by 76,000 people. "How you feeling, Carlos?" "I'm okay, just happy to be here. Papa would be so excited." "Tell me about your dad." "He worked construction. He saw you 12 times. He said your songs were about people like us, people who work hard and love their families." Bruce felt tears running down his face. This child understood something that many adults missed about his music. It wasn't about the stardom or the stadium shows. It was about working families, fathers and sons, the American dream in all its complexity. "Your dad was right, Carlos. And you know what? Tonight, Thunder Road belongs to you and him." Bruce walked to the piano that sat at the side of the stage, leaving behind the electric guitars and amplifiers. This moment called for something quieter, more intimate. "This song is for Roberto Rivera," Bruce announced to the stadium. "A construction worker from Newark who saw me perform 12 times and sang Thunder Road to his son every night. Roberto, your boy is here. And he's the bravest kid I've ever met." When Bruce began playing the opening notes of Thunder Road on piano, something extraordinary happened in Giant Stadium. The song that had been a rock anthem became a prayer. The venue that had been a concert hall became a cathedral. Carlos began singing immediately, his voice weak but pure in its honesty. Bruce matched his tempo, following the boy's lead the way his father would have wanted. By the first chorus, something unprecedented occurred. 76,000 people began singing along, but not with their usual concert energy. They sang softly, gently, turning the stadium into the world's largest lullaby for a dying child and his father's memory. Tough construction workers who'd known Roberto wept openly. Mothers held their children closer. Everyone understood they were witnessing something that transcended music. When the song ended, the silence lasted nearly 2 full minutes. Then the applause began. Not applause for a performance, but applause for love, for courage, for a bond between father and son that death couldn't break. Bruce reached into his pocket and pulled out his harmonica, the one he'd used on every song that night. "This was your dad's favorite song, Carlos. Now it belongs to both of you." and every time I play it, I'll remember Roberto Rivera and his boy from Newark. Carlos looked up at Bruce with eyes that held too much wisdom for 12 years. Will you play it for other kids who miss their dads? Every single night, Carlos. That's a promise. As security helped Carlos back to his seat, Bruce handed him the microphone one final time. Say goodnight to Giant Stadium, Carlos. Good night, Giant Stadium, Carlos called out, his voice stronger than it had been all evening. Thank you for singing Papa's song with me. The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes. The concert continued for another 90 minutes. But everyone knew the real show had already happened. Bruce dedicated My Hometown to Carlos and Roberto. And the energy in Giant Stadium was unlike anything anyone had experienced. After the show, Bruce spent an hour with Carlos and Maria in a trailer behind the stage. He gave Carlos his personal harmonica and promised to stay in touch. That conversation began a friendship that would last for the remaining months of Carlos's life. Carlos lived for 12 weeks after the concert, 3 times longer than doctors had predicted. He spent that time visiting other children in Newark Beth Israel's pediatric ward, sharing his story and singing Thunder Road to kids who were fighting their own battles. Bruce called the Rivera family every Sunday after that, and those conversations became the highlight of everyone's week. Carlos taught Bruce about real courage, while Bruce reminded Carlos that his father's love lived on in every note of their song. When Carlos passed away in November 1985, Bruce attended his funeral at St. Lucy's Church in Newark and performed Thunder Road on acoustic guitar. The service was packed with construction workers, diner waitresses, and hospital staff who had all been touched by the Rivera family's story. Bruce's words at the funeral were simple but profound. Carlos Rivera taught me that music isn't about entertainment or success, it's about connection. It's about keeping love alive even when everything else fails. The bootleg recordings of that Giant Stadium performance became legendary in Bruce fan circles, traded like precious artifacts. But more importantly, Bruce began dedicating Thunder Road at every subsequent concert to Carlos and Roberto Rivera and all the fathers and sons who sing together. The Carlos Rivera Memorial Fund was established at Newark Beth Israel Hospital, providing music therapy for children with cancer. Bruce contributed the first $10,000 and performed at a benefit concert that raised hundreds of thousands more. That night at Giant Stadium became part of Bruce Springsteen folklore. But its impact went far beyond music history. It reminded everyone present that in a world that often feels harsh and divided, we're all connected by the same hopes, fears, and love that make us human. Carlos Rivera showed 76,000 people that night that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about facing your fears with grace and finding joy in the time you have. His 12 years of life contained more wisdom about love and loss than most people accumulate in a lifetime. Sometimes the most powerful moments happen when we stop everything to acknowledge someone who needs to be seen. Bruce could have continued his set and addressed Carlos's request privately. Instead, he chose to share that moment with an entire stadium, creating a community of love around a dying child and his father's memory. And in 1985, there was no internet to spread the story instantly around the world. But word traveled through the network that really mattered. Heart to heart, person to person, life to life. People who were there that night told their families, who told their friends, who told their children about the night Bruce Springsteen stopped a concert for a boy named Carlos Rivera. Today, nearly 40 years later, Bruce still plays Thunder Road at every concert with the same dedication. And somewhere in Newark, somewhere in heaven, a father and son are still singing along together, just like they always did. That's the real story of August 12th, 1985. Not just what happened on stage at Giant Stadium, but what it taught all of us about the power of music to heal, to connect, and to keep love alive even after death. Because some songs are bigger than the people who sing them. Some moments are more important than the shows they interrupt. And some promises, like the one a father made to his son with a lullaby every night, last forever.